Mary Kay. I mean, seriously. Great, great reviews. When you rewatch the movie at events like this, do you view it any differently than you did originally?
Yes, you do. It's, I don't even know how to describe it. The first time I saw it, I just was frozen and very emotional. And now the emotion doesn't come up in the same way. But it's interesting because there's a thing that goes on in the audience. But I was very nervous to come to my hometown and show this film. I felt really, really nervous because I wanted everyone to enjoy the movie. But this is a tense, dark movie, and so it affects people differently, and sometimes it's a mirror for what's going on in their lives, and other times, I know young people I've talked to or heard about from the producers really got depressed about all the dying going on. And they said, oh, is this what we have to look forward to? So anyway, this was I was unusually nervous for this particular screening. So again, I appreciate everyone that came to the film.
You know, this is the second time I've seen the film, and tonight I was able to appreciate the humor more than when I watched it by myself. Have you experienced that at all?
I'm so glad anyone can find any humor in it.
Oh, I did. We all laughed. You heard us laughing.
Yes, I was thrilled.
Was there a turning point when you were making the movie that you connected with Diane on a deeper level?
Diane, in some ways, my grandmother was a woman. My grandmother Mary, or Grandma Mary as we called her, from rural Texas. I'm so sorry. I knew this was going to happen.
No.
It was a community where people were always bringing casseroles and cakes and pies and picking each other up and doing all of that. So that reminded me so much of that town and that community relationship, that neighbors took care of each other and really cared about each other, but they were all about serving each other in a certain way. Some of them didn't know who they were without serving others. And so Diane goes on a journey to sort of have self-reflection about what does she want at a certain point. Not being narcissistic, but just discovering who she is and what she might need to help give her life more meaning outside of serving other people. But I think we all have shame, things that we're ashamed that we did or said to our loved ones, or ones that weren't our loved ones, kids at school. I don't think I was ever a bully, like I've heard stories, but I think we've all said or done something that we felt shame about or carried guilt for some particular thing. And I think Diane has a big burden of this and doesn't know how to let go of that and forgive herself. We need to forgive others, but we also need to learn to forgive ourselves. So I certainly have had moments like that, and not to the extent that Diane does. So there are elements of her that reminded me of people I knew or that I could identify with, even though I don't live in that place in my own life, but can relate to it enough.
When you play a character like Diane, does it change you at all?
I think there's something healing about playing a character that goes through that struggle, a life struggle, because we all struggle in life. We have our own particular version and way that we carry a struggle and the child in our past and the family dynamics that we grew up with, which may no longer serve us, but we have to learn how to transform through that and go to the next level of consciousness and not pass it on to our children, hopefully. I don't think Diane is a woman who's ever been in therapy, but I think when she reads Emily Dickinson poems and starts writing in her journal and starts reflecting on her own life, she learns some things she starts to become self-reflective and goes deeper, and I think finds more satisfaction in her day-to-day life.
For you, what were some of the most pivotal scenes in the film?
I think the scene, obviously, with her son at the end when he comes and says, I taught myself to disapprove of you because everyone else was. So I just thought, well, maybe that's what I'm supposed to think. I love the scene in the soup kitchen with the gentleman that told her he felt sanctified when she served him, who talked about the shame of his aunt and helped her to understand a little bit about how how she didn't need to keep doing that in her life. I enjoyed the Leon Russell song that I got to.
Yay!
I picked that and I said, I got to do this song by Leon, because Leon had died not too long prior to that, and I really wanted to have that song in there. And luckily we were able to, because we got the Bob Dylan song, because we knew somebody that managed the Bob Dylan catalog for a decent price, and so they agreed to give us the equal price, because I was afraid we couldn't afford it. But I don't know, most of the scenes, obviously when the son comes back and he's left and gone to rehab on his own, but they all had a little kernel of something that was interesting to play.
Even the quieter scenes when Diane is just jotting down her to-do list or writing in the journal, there was a quiet intensity to that I thought, is that hard to do, to play a scene that is not as intense for the audience, but still it's so critical to the story?
No, sometimes all the interconnecting scenes are just fun, because the heavy burden of the lines and what's going to happen, you're just being in the moment. And in spite of how dark and intense it was and emotional, at times it was really fun. A lot of times it was fun. Most of the time it was fun.
You've mentioned working with Jake Lacey Bryan. What about Estelle Parsons? What was that like?
She's a character. She's 91, I think, and she is like an athlete. She's been very athletic her whole life and does yoga and all this stuff. And I didn't even know she was that old the first few scenes we did together, and we worked till 3 a.m. one night in those hospital scenes, and she was kind of cranky, and I thought, and I realized, and then I found out she was 91. I thought, how's she even awake? Because that was a long day, and I was beside myself I was so tired I could barely move, and I thought, of course she's cranky. I'm cranky too. But she was really interesting, and she is a legend in New York and on Broadway, and so it was great to work with her. All of those women. Phyllis Somerville, who was the woman saying, we're from the backwoods, and with those cigarettes and that beautiful voice of hers, and Deidre O'Connell playing my cousin who had cancer, and Andrea Martin, my friend Bobby. I just thought they were all fantastic.
And we should also mention the writer-director, Kent Jones.
Kent Jones, who he's the programmer for the New York Film Festival, and he's a film scholar and critic. He writes for Lincoln Center Film Forum magazine and all these different, that may not be the name of it, but the Lincoln Center magazine, film magazine. And he's done documentaries. He did one on Hitchcock and Truffaut about that legendary book, and other documentaries with Martin Scorsese, but this is his first narrative film, so it was great to work with him.
Did you have it written into your contract that you got to keep the wardrobe?
No. If I never see that wardrobe again, I'll be thrilled. I thought, well, isn't this pretty?
Well, I love the hat.
But I love the hat. I have the hat and I have the wig.
Well, good. That's cool. Let's open it up to questions from the audience. I bet you have some questions about the film and other aspects of Mary Kay's career as well. Yes?
I know there is a screenplay, but was any of the dialogue
I threw in a bunch of stuff, if I do say so myself. Like when his hideous daughter kept hugging me. It's good, Tally, thank you.
That was a great
And
moment.
other lines.
Other questions? Somebody over here?
Don't point at them, they're scared.
Are they scared? Well, there's Barry back in the back. I know he has a question.
I'm still not happy about the end of Big Chill. Actually, I have a question. I'm watching the last hour of it, and your entire body played sad. Your entire body embodied that weight of the world. It was really an amazing performance. Every part of you believable. I just want to let you know that was a really an amazing transformation.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I have not a question, but I'm from Rochester, Texas.
Oh,
About 5 miles north of Rural,
really? You're from Rochester?
from Rochester.
Well,
And
God
my
love.
mother was a very good friend of your grandmother.
Really?
And your Aunt Mary, Mirren,
Oh, yes, Cousin Mary, she's 99.
you may not remember this, but I lived in San Diego for a while. And one summer, or I think it was summer, they came out to see me, Mary and my mother. And
Oh.
we called you and you came down on the train
I do remember that.
and we had brunch together.
A long time ago. When was that? In the 90s?
About 30 years ago, I hate to say that.
Yeah. Way back in my brain, I can remember that.
But when we were having brunch, you were sitting there taking notes and writing down things that they were
Because
saying.
you all have such colorful phrases.
And I thought to myself, she's probably going to put these in a screenplay someday. So
That darn screenplay is still not where it ought to be. And before I die, I hope to finish it correctly.
I'm just wondering if you want my phone number now. But in the meantime, I have 2 pictures for you from that day.
Oh, good. I look forward.
And
Fantastic. How fun. There's other people from Rural and Dallas and Abilene here, right back there somewhere. But there's Kathy Sue and Jenny and Misty and Mark. And thank you. So there's other rural people back there. Did
Oh.
you see them?
well, they're our rivals, so I won't say anything.
Oh my goodness. You probably can't see. Long time ago. This woman has
Yeah.
a question.
I have a lot of questions. I'm trying to stick to the most interesting questions that they are at all. Anyway, what research, I mean, you're a very experienced actor. There may not have been much, but what research did you do in the character specifically to the traits of codependency with this lady?
I went to a few codependency meetings, and I read a lot of books about it. But I also know it from friends who've had addiction issues, and I just know what that dynamic is. We have addiction in my family. I think almost everybody's family has it somewhere. And so I was very familiar with the codependent dynamic. But because I had my experience in my mother's hometown too, of Port Arthur, Texas, which is another whole version of rural on the Gulf Coast, and just small towns and small communities. Even though this was up in supposedly Pittsfield, Massachusetts, we shot it in upstate New York. It's the same dynamic, I think, in small towns. So that part I felt familiar with. But I use dream work, I use mindful meditation to get into a relaxed state. There's all kind of different techniques I use to get into the emotional frame of mind, but sometimes just the word and your other acting partner can take you there, because if you're both in sync, you can go there. Sometimes just zoom there, and other times it takes longer. But the writing has a lot to do with it. If the writing's good, it's much easier, but there are some sneaky ones that you think it's going to be an easy scene, and it'll suddenly you go, what's happening? This is hard.
I'm a retired therapist, and I must say, you did, a very believable job. I'm kind of tired now watching.
I understand. That's what I was worried about. People would go,
Drag on your soul, and you did a wonderful job, and very believable.
thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
for that. The other question I had is was there any particular reason you chose Leon, that particular song that Leon did?
Because I love it. And it's a fun song to dance to. I didn't really get to, I had to be Diane instead of Mary Kay. 'Cause I wanted to get down, I'm going down. But it just hit me as the right song. And I danced in my living room of the Airbnb that I stayed in while I was shooting, like every night for exercise, and to just get in a certain mood, I just put that song on and dance to it over and over, and I loved it. I had a whole Diane playlist of different musical songs that I picked out, and that was.
The question.
Did you get any particular feedback after you ushered radar into the landfill?
No, you mean from the MASH fans? I must have, but that was so long ago, I can't remember. That was one of my first acting jobs that I ever had, and it was the first single camera film acting job. And we had this very macho, his name was Don something, really macho director. And I had co-written the script with my friend Linda Bloodworth, and he just thought, what is she doing in here? And he was so mean. And I was nervous because I hadn't done a single camera film. And I also learned something about writing, which is I didn't connect some of the dots. And one idea jumped way over here from A to Q, RST, and then down to Z. And I thought, this scene is hard to act. And I learned about writing because I had not connected all the dots. But I don't, except for him being mean to me, I don't remember much fan feedback. Do you have any feedback you'd like to?
It was a riveting scene.
Thanks.
There's a question.
Actually, one of the credits that popped out to me was one of the producers, Lauren Moberman.
Yes.
And this film was actually making me think of Time Out of Mind, this film with Richard Gere.
Uh-huh.
The reason I was equating the two was this film, like that one, was such a well-observed character study, in one that easily could have been melodramatic, overwrought. And so I guess what leads to my question, what's the process of calibrating the performance, the film, to get it to where it's at so it's not overwrought and melodramatic and overboard? What was that process of calibration like?
My biggest fear is being arrested by the acting police. So I will tend to go, the less is, in my opinion, always more. Sometimes they'll ask me to pump it up a little bit, and sometimes I decline to pump it up a little bit because I just would prefer to be subtle as opposed to people wanting to strangle me for being overacting. So usually I go less. But the thing is, this is a weird fact. If you're doing animation and it's just your voice, you have to do more, a lot more. And I had to learn that the hard way, because if you don't see the face and the body to go with the vocal portion, it feels not enough in animation for some reason. So I had to really learn how to be much bigger when I do animation, because it sounds really flat if you don't see the face and the body and everything. Sounds almost monotone. So that's a time that you have to go much bigger. I'm making this up, of course,
Yeah.
so.
It sure sounds good.
Well, God love.
And you've certainly given us an interesting career to watch you and follow your great movies and TV work, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you, and it was really fun babysitting you. I used to roll up, wash, put in curlers, comb out, rat to the high heavens, spray with, and then comb into bubbles and beehives all the babysitting kids. Their parents would come home and they'd have a giant beehive hairdo. And then it would just split all of their ends, and it was sprayed within an inch of its life. And the mother would go, "Are you going to the prom?" And they would be 5. Somebody's had a hand over
Yeah.
there.
Was it hard to get the film produced? Just wonder about the process of making an independent film like this.
I met Kent Jones at the Berkshire Film Festival. I was invited to be on the jury there one year, about 5 or 6 years ago. My friend from LA, who I was really good friends with, she and her family moved to the Berkshires, to Lenox. She was on the board of this film festival, and I went mainly to see her and visit. But the Berkshires are so beautiful. I ended up going for 5 years, but the last 5 years and being on the jury. But I met Kent Jones that first summer, and we became friends because we were on the jury together. And he said to me, after we got home, he sent me a letter and said, "You know, I saw you in the Rainmaker, Francis Coppola movie years ago, and I played Dot Black, whose son had to go against the insurance company. He had leukemia or something." And he said, "When I saw you play that, I thought of my mother's family, the matriarchal aunts and all my cousins. It was a matriarchal family, and I was an only child, and they were just like my, I was close to all of them. And I thought that woman could play my mother." And he said, "I've been wanting to write a screenplay, and I would like to write one for you about this. Would you be interested?" No one's ever asked me if I wanted to star in a movie. I went, "Yes." But of course, people say this all the time, and either they write it and it's not very good, not professional enough to really do, or that you never see it again. I mean, they don't really do it. But most of the ones that have been given to me are nice and sweet, but they're just not quite there for professional production. And so I said, "Great, yeah." And then I didn't get a script for a couple of years. And then he sent me an email about something, and I said, "Whatever happened to that script?" I didn't hear back, but he was making all these documentaries in the meantime, plus running the New York Film Festival. So the next thing I know, before we go back about 3 years later, there's a script. He emailed me a script. And it was different than this, but basically the same script, but we changed a lot of things. But it moved me when I read it. It was not conventional. It's totally not commercial, as you've just witnessed. And I thought, no one's going to give the money for me because I'm not a bankable name. It's never going to happen. But what a nice thing that he did it. And then because he's worked with Martin Scorsese for many years, he was our executive producer, so that name helped. Then he hitched up with Oren Moverman and the producers, but we still didn't have the money. Then I did a movie called State Like Sleep with this man, Andy Vossman, and said, "What are you doing next?" And I said, "Well, there's this independent film, but I don't think we have all the money. Well, he ended up hooking up with Oren, going into business with him, and he gave us the money. So it was a miracle that we got it, and it was made for $1.59. So there was that. But we had everything we needed. We shot it in 20 days, and we had a very inexperienced young crew, but they worked their tails off. They gave it everything they had. And it was really fun. It was stressful, and it was exhausting, but it was thrilling and exciting at the same time.
There's a gentleman over here who'd had his hand up. Not here now? Oh, there, okay.
Can you share some thoughts from Mary Hartman?
It was a great show. It was a Martian show, and there'll never be another one like it again. Soap thought they were like it, but they were the civilian version. But it was of a particular time and place. I don't think you can try to repeat it. When it was good, it was really good, and when it was bad, it really was stunk. Because we did 5 shows a day, 35 pages a day, 5 shows a week, 35 pages a day, and that was really hard. And everyone that worked on, and we did 300 and something episodes in 2 years or something insane, and we were all mentally ill after we finished. Literally fried like a corn fritter.
Other questions?
I want to know if Lawrence Kasdan has ever come to you guys to try to follow the group 30 years later after.
We still have dinners all the time. I'll be seeing Glenn Close when I go back home. She's got a film coming out, and I'm sure we'll be at Larry and Meg's house having a dinner. But I don't think, people have mentioned us having I don't think you could ever really follow up. They'd go, "Where is your and Kevin's baby?" And I'll say, "Just didn't work out." I got over it.
Yeah. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, Jean Triplehorn is in the audience, and you two starred together, and Big Love. And it was on my all-time
Stand
favorite
up,
shows.
Jean.
Yeah.
Stand up.
Woo!
Woo! Jean Triplehorn!
What a wonderful show. How many of you wanted to be a sister wife? I did. Not a real sister wife, but an HBO sister wife. Your thoughts on that show, Mary Kay?
I thought it was amazing. If you've never seen it, go to Netflix. It starts out slow, and then it just goes like a locomotive train. I think it is beautifully written. Mark Olson and Will Sheffer are brilliant writers. It's about family. Yes, it's about Mormon fundamentalists, but it's about each and every one of you and your family. It's that universal. What else, Jean? It was Big Love, and we had a great, great time doing it.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was fun working with a fellow Okie, too, for
Right,
sure.
right.
Not to mention Tulsan.
More questions? Yeah.
What did you take away from your experience?
That we have to forgive others and ourselves. We can't forgive others if we don't know how to forgive ourselves, and that life is a process, and if we're open to it, there's so much to learn, and it's great. But I started thinking about death in a way that I never have before. I mean, I really started facing that death is a part of life. And that was a new thing for me. Just even thinking about death.
We've just gotten the signal that we're out of time. I can hardly believe it. It's flown by so quickly. But just let me say, Mary Kay, thank you for coming back to Tulsa and letting us celebrate you and your good work. What an experience for all of us to get to share this with you.
Well, I thank all of you for coming to this screening. I love Tulsa. I have such an emotional place and loving place in my heart for this town, and having grown up here and all the people I love here, and I really am so excited to be here to show this film with you all, and it meant a lot to me to be able to show it here in my hometown.
And in closing, let's wish the Circle a very happy 90th
Yes,
birthday.
happy birthday, Circle Cinema. And I'll see you guys out there.